and completely last minute, a resistance open mic. I will post the URL. You have to click on, or actually not click on, but kind of retype because it's not a link, but it's, but once you type in the URL, you will be in the virtual green room waiting in the queue to join me live when I let you in. I'm the producer as well as the host of this little call-in program. And I will post the URL right there. This is a resistance open mic. And the idea, although last minute and not organized in advance, not organized at all, and it might work better if with some actual prior planning. However, the idea is this. If you are currently involved with a rent strike, or if you just didn't pay the rent this month, or if you're involved with feeding people in the streets, or taking care of sick people, or running for office, or organizing an online event of some kind, or you're plotting the revolution, or you wrote a song about feeling isolated, or you just feel like talking about how long it's taking for your government relief check to arrive, it'd be great to hear from you. Not only would I love to hear from you, but I promise other people would too. I host an open mic oriented towards music and poetry every Monday right here, and a song or a poem would be very welcome for this one too. But I'd like to open it up to any kind of public service announcements and stories from the front lines, whichever front lines they may be, wherever they may be. So you just click that URL, or actually, type it out, look at it and type it out. The main thing is that last bunch of numbers and letters, if you can remember StreamYard.com, and just, type in that last bunch of numbers and letters. And then you'll be in the virtual green room, and I can bring you on, when it's a good time, like not while somebody else is talking, for example, which at the moment is just me, So you type that out to join the conversation, and I will begin the conversation with my own little contribution by reading the open letter to my landlord that I wrote after the corporation that owns the building I live in decided to raise the rent last March, like they do every year, pandemic or no pandemic. And I hope that while I'm reading my open letter, someone out there might feel compelled to click that link and get in the virtual green room on StreamYard, the live streaming platform I'm using for this broadcast. While people consider whether they are up for joining the conversation here with no advanced warning, and if they want to be, maybe if you're too shy to be showing your face in front of this potentially massive audience out there, it's up to you. I understand if you don't want to, but if you do, and if you can join the conversation and tell us something about what's going on where you are, you can even just do it like by voice without us seeing your face if you want. But you just get in the virtual green room by clicking, not clicking, but by putting in that URL there into a browser. This is the Resistance Open Mic, and I will try this again, whether people join the conversation today or not. I will try this again with some advanced planning sometime soon, and I will, let people know in advance that it's happening. And let's see, comments. There are comments. Good. Hello, comrade. Good. Hello. And now back to that URL. That's the URL. If you want to type that in and join the conversation. If you don't, we'll try it again anyway, regardless. But I will now recite the letter that I wrote to my landlord, in case you wrote a letter like this to your landlord, which you want to tell us about. Are you paying the rent? 1 out of 4 renters in this country are not paying the rent right now, largely because they can't, but often in other cases because they're on rent strike, or in solidarity with those who can't pay the rent. Or they just think that the amount of rent they're being charged is outrageous by the corporations that are just taking all that money for their investors and don't need it and aren't raising the rents for any reason other than just profit. But anyway, here's the letter I wrote to my landlord. And if you wrote such a letter to your landlord, please chime in and and read it to us. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Randall, just to let you know, since we've never met, I'm one of your many residential tenants. I imagine that between you and your corporation, the Randall Group, and then between that and its subsidiary, CTL Management, Inc., there are several degrees of disconnect. So you may or may not be aware that your corporate representatives have just sent me, and presumably your thousands of other tenants up and down the West Coast, notifications of yet another annual increase in our monthly rent. The letter, accepted here, is a very slight variation of the same one we have received every year since I moved into one of the many buildings you own in Portland, Oregon in 2007. You or the management company you own has more than doubled our rent since that time. You have never once provided any explanation in your annual letters for why the rent has to increase so much more than other people's wages do. As you may know, wages have remained stagnant in this country for decades, as our life expectancy has as well. The thing is, stagnant wages are only leading to a life expectancy that is not rising because expenses are not stagnant. Expenses are always rising. Chief among those expenses? Rent charged by people like you and corporations like yours. It admittedly does really irk me that in 2011, you donated $10 million to a hospital here in Portland so that they named the children's wing of the hospital after you. Every time I pass that hospital, it upsets me to think that the reason my 3 children have to live in the same small apartment I moved into when I only had 1 child is because you keep raising our rent by such an unconscionable, unmanageable amount every year. How many children in this city with parents less fortunate than we are now homeless because of your unfettered greed, because your wealth is more important than the lives of your tenants, while you donate money to a hospital that cares for children? The irony is what upsets me, not the donation itself. It's the narcissism involved with such BS philanthropy, the fake philanthropy of someone who wants their name on a sign but doesn't care about the children who suffer in order to put that name on the sign. Of course, I'm just making assumptions about your motives. Maybe you really do care about regular people. If so, you can start to show that by, for example, declaring a suspension of rent for the duration of the crisis, and then lowering the rent you charge post-crisis to something more compatible with the actual living situations of actual people, not just your preferred people, imports from even more expensive cities who are moving into your apartments, and displacing people who grew up around here or have lived here a long time. This may just be the way capitalism works, and you're just another commercial and residential real estate company that is going along with the capitalist program. But the thing is, you and the lobbying group that you support actually lobbies in state capitals to make sure there is no regulation passed that interferes with your ever-increasing profits. So you're not just part of a bad system. You are the bad system. People like you and corporations that people like you own need to be resisted if there is any hope for this horrendously divided and literally very sick society. I, like many of your current and especially former tenants here in Portland, am an artist. I'm a touring songwriter. I make a living largely from traveling around the world and performing. Now, I can't even travel and perform in Oregon, let alone in Europe, where I spend much of my professional life. Oh, and the reason I tour Europe so much in the first place, instead of more locally, and the reason I usually spend so many more months away from home than I used to, touring there in Europe, is largely because of you and your rent increases. Now I can't tour at all. Yet you not only want the rent as usual, as if there weren't a massive global catastrophe going on, as if the entire society weren't under some form of quarantine, but you have the audacity to actually raise it. Landlords like you are a big part of this society's problem. Not landlords like some of my friends who are struggling to pay their mortgages, struggling to find a way to let their tenants slide on rent, but landlords specifically like you, who own so many buildings. Even your corporate clients are announcing they're not going to pay their rent for April. We lowly residential tenants would be idiots not to do the same, really. Especially since so many of us actually can't. I can, for now. I just toured Australia before the world closed its borders, so although the rest of my spring tour in North America and Europe was cancelled, and although I'm drowning in credit card debt I was planning to pay off with that tour, I've got a little money, no thanks to you. But it seems to us that there are better things to hold on to that money to do, especially while there is a statewide ban on evictions and power shutoffs. Everything is moving very fast, as you know. We'll see what new laws get passed and how much government aid there is for people like me. I'm sure there will be lots of government aid for corporations like yours. Plus, you don't need any more money. You're very rich. It's time for you to change your ways. Blame the pandemic, or blame me, or blame society, I don't care. But two of the people who are to blame for my family's relative poverty, and for the fact that most of my friends have moved out of Portland since I first moved here, for the fact that any musician, even slightly less successful than me, can't afford to live in this city, are you guys, Mr. and Mrs. Randall. We regular people don't expect people like you to change without a fight. But let this be entirely clear. If there is to be a class war in America, it is people like you who started it. We are only responding to your mindless greed and the broken system which people like you broke and make sure stays broken. No more. Sincerely, David Rovix, your tenant. Well, there's my contribution to this open mic, and that was the open letter I wrote to my landlord. And while I was reciting that letter, somebody appeared in the green room named Remzi. I believe his name was Remzi. It was a very quick, he only appeared very quickly there. And I saw the name Remzi appear and then he disappeared. But Remzi, if you're still out there, please come back. And come back because you're so far the only one who's joining this open mic, which I did not tell anybody about in advance, really. And, only decided to do minutes before the top of the hour. But if nobody is going to join me on this open mic, then I will not just sit here by myself. I'll go away. But I could, I don't know. I don't need to waste. Here's Ramsey. Wanda Ramsey. Or is it Remzi? Wait a second here. I'll go away. How are you?
Hello.
Remzi, hey. Now, are you in Denver, Colorado by chance? Wanda Ramsey. No.
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. And there's a bit of a voices. Yeah, the voices. Let's see. There's some kind of a connection thing. You don't have a headset you could put on, do you?
Let me get earphones.
Yeah, that'll help a lot.
Because I'm hearing a delay as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too. I'm hearing my voice in your speakers coming through somehow or other, but sometimes the sound processing eliminates that, and other times it doesn't. But I'm so excited to have an actual caller. So excited to have a participant in the call-in show that I only just started only moments ago. So, yeah.
So,
what are you up to, Remzi? Tell us about it, please.
I'm still hearing
a delay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just so that's a tricky thing, especially if you have not done a lot of LSD to ignore the delay. But just I'll just shut up and you won't hear the delay and tell us anything that you have to say, please. Are you on rent strike?
Because the delay sounds like it's maybe 30 seconds long.
30 seconds? Well,
you're still going.
Oh, wow.
So now you just stopped from the previous time.
Wow.
Now myself, we can't do this. Is there something else? Is it on my end?
I don't know. I've never had a 30-second delay. Only 2 seconds usually.
I it's impossible.
Right, right.
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to leave. Right?
I understand. I
Sorry.
don't know. Look, you can just talk, and I'll stop talking, and then it'll
I'll
work.
attempt it with a different browser. So I'll come back.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, that was interesting. He was entirely audible in real time to me, but he was hearing what I was saying much later. Sometimes these signals have to go get processed by, the NSA, and I think they're located in Utah, and it has to go through all these different servers. So who knows how long it takes before it gets where it might be going. Let's see. Let's see if this is any better.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had I accidentally volume going on the original feed, and the other. That's why I was. So apparently, the feed, 30 seconds behind.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. It has to be processed.
Okay, so that's what we'll.
Tell me what's going on with you, Remzi?
We're also renters. My apologies. I'm a resident of Portland. I do listen to KBOO. Is that where we're on right now?
Yeah, just started broadcasting this on KBOO.
So are we on the radio?
No, on their Facebook page, as well as
Okay.
on the Facebook page of Popular Resistance and my various, personal platforms, my YouTube channel and stuff.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is not the radio station.
No,
that's live.
It's hosted. It is on their Facebook page, so it's but it's not on the radio. No. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything specific to say in terms of my personal situation. I don't really care to talk about that.
Sure.
In terms of my housing. However, I do know that that the housing issue can be solved. Of course, it can't be solved using the existing economic system that we have. The way that the game is structured, the way that money is created, and the way that the money circulates back to the owners means that those at the bottom are always going to not have enough money. I mean, anyway, so
Yeah.
it is possible to eliminate homelessness and poverty, but you have to change the economic game.
Yeah, right. Isn't that the situation, huh? So
Well,
what would be
yeah,
your suggestion? Well, there's a study I read about how ever since the 1840s, as wages have risen, rents have risen, basically just in combination, very intentionally. And the landlords in New York City were some of the biggest supporters of the labor movement at the beginning of the labor movement because they knew they could get higher rents.
right. Well, interestingly, I'm both a landlord and a tenant.
Yeah, me too.
I understand both sides. I mean, my tenants probably would say I'm the best fucking landlord ever, but that's just my bias. Needless to say, the me and a group of other people. I'm not, obviously we're not the only ones who see it this way, but we're beginning to recognize the existing structure as a game, kind of, right? So if we can say that the existing game that humanity's been playing is to own property for either value extraction or value appreciation, and this is where owning of real estate comes in play.
It's an investment. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're imagining is that what if we turn that upside down and say, instead, why don't we create a system where we manage the property for value creation instead of value extraction and value appreciation? So in the sense that instead of you owning things for value extraction, you would just merely process them. They would flow through you to the end user. So there would be use value. We would essentially be competing to turn things into personal possessions, things that we use, though, things like TVs, laptops, couches, not necessarily a building downtown or a piece of land or a farm, because those are the commons. Those are things that we all can are used to create the value from. So anyway, so if by switching it from that equation, we can then issue the money, the token, because what money essentially is an access token. It's used for you to use to access the limited supplies in the world, right? And to compete for those limited supplies, because some things are scarce and limited. And so anyway, so what if we just gave that currency, the token, as a UBI to each individual, right? And
Universal
then
basic income. Yeah.
correct that idea, except that in this equation, the token itself wouldn't isn't created physically perpetually like money is today. So what that means is you would get the UBI, but you would use it to compete to buy things. So when you buy a TV, the money would disappear. The TV still has value, so because it's a piece of property. So all that happened was the value was transferred, from you to the TV. But if you use the currency to buy food, well, then you've consumed the food, and the value's gone, so the money deletes. The producers who are making the food and the people who are making the TVs are not dependent upon the money flowing back to them to be able to produce it, because they're already creating money. They're collecting value both as UBI, right? But also we can create a proof of value system whereby every time you learn, you play, you work, you're creating value. You get to collect it directly. So the workers who are building the TVs, the teachers who are teaching our students, okay, they wouldn't be. We don't have to pay them through taxes, through our money. They would be collecting the value that they're creating because they earned it. And so by extension, when they earn that value, they would be then deciding where to spend it, where on what to convert that value they created towards their personal possessions. And so
Right.
then they would use that to compete, and we can use that accounting, that unit of account, as a signaling system to determine what to produce, to signal our needs and desires, so that we can still have an open market, but that the open market isn't designed to control us, but rather it's designed for us as individuals to utilize, to create what we want to create, what we want to imagine into the world. And so it would change, it from bosses in the capitalists deciding what to build, where to build, how to build it, from our individual choices, bottom up, democratically, cooperatively, determining where we work, how we work, and what to produce.
It sounds like a fascinating whole sort of system to sort of almost like an automated form of monetary exchange of some form that doesn't
Yeah,
involve just a certain small percentage of people owning everything in the first place. Although, of course, getting to
correct.
the point where that's not the situation will involve a lot of struggle. But this model you're talking about replacing it with, is there any? It sounds like the sort of thing somebody's written a book about. Can you point this in? It sounds like something you did not just come up with yesterday. Can you tell us a little more?
Yeah, no, I came up with this about 5 years ago, so it's in development. There's a website. I can type it in if you want, or I can just say it out
Yeah,
loud.
I can. Yeah, what? Say it out
It's,
loud.
it's common-planet.org, common-planet.org. And I am writing a book for it right now, so the book
Uh-huh.
probably won't be done for another couple of months or so.
And it's all about the commons, basically, the commons and how we can. I mean, this whole question
Converting
of
the commons, right? Converting the existing private ownership of land, resources, and buildings to the commons,
yeah,
and then enabling and freeing individuals in the labor to be able to produce and create the value themselves. There wouldn't be any banks. You would never run out of money. You wouldn't have to pay rent, by the way.
mm,
There would be no mortgages. There would be no taxes. There would be no property taxes. You would be able to live in your house for free forever, for as long as you want, and you can have the ability to move anywhere you want in the world, like for like. So there would be financialization in terms of what kind of quality house you might have qualified for, but you don't have to pay for it. So, for example, where you live today, whatever the value of your house is, um, you know, you'll be able to move like for like. And if you wanted to have a better house, you could use the tokens, the value tokens that you're earning and collecting to buy, to buy up a better quality house if you wanted. So if you wanted access to better quality housing, you can do that. You can use your access token, work more, produce more, create more, and earn it, and then you would have it. But no one would be able to take what you have. Like your existing personal residence would be yours forever. for free. So at least that all humans would have a base level of security of knowing we wouldn't have to, we don't have to, I don't have to wake up tomorrow not having to worry about, where I'm going to live. Or am I going to be able to have enough tokens to fucking have some food that we grow plenty of? I'm sorry
Have
if I
you ever?
swear. Is that
No,
loud?
no, it's okay. We're not in the radio. It's okay. Yeah. Have you ever heard of a 19th century economist named Henry George?
Of course.
Wait,
Georgia, yeah.
are you a Georgist? Would you say, or it was?
Yes and no. I would be a Georgist if I
Can you
only.
just tell us? I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're the first person I've talked to, other than an economist who recommended Henry George to me, who has ever heard of Henry George. So, can you just tell our viewers? And by the way, this is an open mic. Anybody is welcome to join the conversation. Just a housekeeping announcement. The URL is there on the screen if anybody else would like to join in. But so far, Remzi is the only one, and you are a very, very interesting person to be talking to. So if we can just continue this for a bit, I'd love to. I think there's more people watching all the time too. So can you tell us about Henry George and a little bit?
Sure. Well, like you mentioned, Henry George's idea was that there should be taxes on the value of the property in such a way as so that we don't have this forever increasing, spiraling, cost of housing constantly going up. So, but he was specifically taxing land, not the actual structures. The structures themselves, of course, can also be taxable as they are for property tax purposes. But Henry George's idea was to tax land, I think, at the federal level, so that you curtail the rentierism of owning lots of real estate and land, because the value that's inherent in the land gets shuffled back over to the government, and then the government can use that to make things better, right? So it's essentially a fair taxation system, and it's good in terms of collecting revenue from and extracting money from piles of capital that have the most, right? The landowners. So that's a good idea. But just like any other idea of taxation or redistribution within the existing game A economics, it can be undone. Just as you can set a tax rate, you can change that rate, like we saw with Trump coming in and say, hey, corporations are paying way too much. Let's let them pay nothing. Anyway, so those can be changed all the time. So the circulatory nature of the existing economic system requires you to constantly have to reshuffle and redistribute money from those that have to those that don't, and in order to make the game work and continue. And as you're seeing today, well, how are you supposed to make the game continue if the only way, the main way for the main players, which is humans, to play and collect value in the game is through labor, but there's not enough jobs for everybody? Well, that's musical chairs. That's not a good game. Obviously, you can't play that game. The people won't want to play that game because it's not conducive to allowing us to participate, right? And so what did they do? They created the Federal Reserve with a mandate, dual mandate of maximum employment, right? Reducing the unemployment to it, because the game, if you don't have a job, then you can't collect money. So if they don't focus on maximizing employment, there's not enough employment opportunities, the people will revolt, right? Because it's due to no fault of our own are we allowed to participate in this game. You guys made the rules. Here I am, a human, and it's not working for me. I'm out here willing to work, but I can't because there's not enough jobs. Anyway, so that part of the equation is a design feature, on purpose, but it's also a major flaw of theirs. And so, in order for the capitalists to make capitalism work, they have to manipulate it. And this is what we're seeing right now with injecting the money into the balance sheets, directly into the balance sheets of banks. Oh my God, the Federal Reserve just this week is now buying corporate debt, corporate bonds. What the fuck? These banks gave money to these corporations so that the corporations can take that money, give it to their shareholder dividends, and now they have debt on their balance sheet. And our U.S. government now is going to that debt off so that that bank, I mean,
Yeah, I think
it
that's
just,
I think just to pause for a moment, that is such an important concept. It seems to me to communicate to people out there. People really need to understand how this works, because I mean, capitalism in the United States, it doesn't work this way in all countries, right? I mean, in some other countries, like in Germany, for example, they reinvest into corporate operations into the workers, and the workers are actually involved in some ways with running
sure.
corporate. I mean, it's a whole different model, right? But here in the United States, it's just
You can,
everything is to the investors.
the factors within the equation can be altered. You can change the percentages, the amounts within the equation to make it better or worse for people or corporations or for the government, et cetera, et cetera. So those can be altered okay, but the game is the same. The equation is the same. So Germany, Japan, China, even, that's supposedly communist, is actually playing the same game. So while China has essentially implemented, not really Georgism, but all of the land is owned by the government China. So you can't own privately, for the most part, land in China. It has no value. Well, it does. I think the state charges a fee for those who want to use it, for their capitalist enterprises.
But the
So that's
rents
how
in Shanghai and Beijing, the rent is like as expensive as New York,
it
I've
is.
heard. How does
It
that
is.
work? Do you know? Like that's just because of the people that own the buildings are able to get away with charging whatever they can charge.
Correct. Well, see, the land is separate from the building. So China owns the land, but the developer and the private capitalists can own the building. So they can charge rent for use of the building, but China's still extracting money from them for the use of that land.
So that kind of like makes Georgism look pretty bad, because I mean things are really bad in China in terms of the cost of rent, right? Although the
No,
productive
that's not
they've built a hell
necessarily.
of a lot of buildings though, so that says something about the power of this capital, I guess.
Perhaps there are other. I think there. I didn't study Georgism too in depth, but I know that there's another country, I can't remember which one, maybe Thailand, that has implemented some semblance of Georgism in terms of taxation of land. So it is, possible to do. If you combine Georgism with an idea of capital homesteading, of taking over, say, the Federal Reserve and the banking sector, of making loans and taking capital interest within the enterprises of the country, and extracting their profits and using that to distribute to the citizens as a UBI or some kind of wealth fund. So you can make capitalism better. There's no one's arguing that we can't make it more fair and better. Sure, you can, but just as you can make it more fair and better, it can be undone quickly by those who take power and change the rules to benefit themselves right away. So the fact that the game is fundamentally a problem. Once you
Right.
get new people in, alter those numbers of equation to benefit themselves, and this is the problem with the equation.
And do you have any particular? I mean, I know, like, one of the things that I often say, and many people often say, I guess, is there's ideas, and having vision is one thing, and it's vitally important, and I think really that cannot be overemphasized in terms of like the kind of importance of having a good imagination and trying to imagine how a society could be different. And if you've traveled much, then you've seen different societies, because they're not all the same. But and there are shades of differences that are important that we can benefit from traveling and learning from. But the point is, like, there's so many good ideas out there about how we could change society so that it's not so unequal, so that maybe it's even not unequal at all. But and that's so important to have these ideas. But then as what was it, who was it, no, not Morgan, it was one of the capitalists from the 19th century who said, one of the railroad barons, I looked it up, he actually did say this, it's not just a rumor mill thing. Why should I worry? I can pay half of the working class to kill the other half. And I think, that is such a relevant point, that he made back then 150 years ago, 170 years ago, or whatever it was, to now, because of course, anytime there's a problem, they just start a war. I mean, anytime the working class is getting well organized in any large country, it seems that basically the next thing that happens is that country is going to war with some other country, and then there goes that whole movement. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on the implementation of these kinds of ideas, and how to, what kind of social movement could actually bring about. I mean, it's a huge question, I know, but it's just we got time. What do you think about that?
Okay, well, that's the last section of my book, is transition, and I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one, of course, who's considering and working on these things. I obviously have collaborators. Obviously, I have a lot of people that I'm talking to and learning from, and advising me as well. So, man, you just got right to the heart of it there. I will say this: it's not going to be as difficult as people imagine. It can happen much quicker than people think it can. But at the same time, I don't. It's not going to be easy, and it hasn't been easy even to get to this point. So, oh God. Okay, so
it's a really big one. But Sartre, the philosopher Sartre, he said the what was it? The infinitely complicating factor. Something paraphrasing here, but the football is infinitely complicated because of the existence of the opposing team. So like these ideas, any good idea, any well thought out idea is easy to implement if you are in charge, but you're not.
So okay, well, I can say that because of the way that Game A is structured and the currency that it uses is unique to Game A, and it's powerful, and because it is a physical possession, it plays differently in the game. So in order to implement ours is more of a transition rather than it's a replacement, a kind of a we can't play my version of the game at the same time as Game A is being played. The two are not compatible. The currencies don't they don't exchange like the currencies today. For example, if you wanted to play Game A today, you can. You can create your own currency. Bitcoin did. China has their own currency. US has their own currency, and they're all exchangeable, right? And they're all the same. They all have the same characteristics. Once it's created, it exists. It might as well exist as if it is a gold coin. Right? It doesn't matter that it's represented on a computer screen. It's able to be exchanged with one another as if it were a gold coin without any exchange of goods. You can give a coin to anyone you want and control their behavior by giving them this coin, obviously. And this is how that quote that you just said about that capitalist, that was probably Rockefeller, by the way, who is because money does control us. Because money, we can only get money from somebody else's money, right? We don't have the opportunity, the ability to create value out of thin air like banks do. So we have to get money from some other people. We have to fight for it. We have to compete for the limited resource that is this money. But in ours, the money isn't digital. Isn't physical. So it's only digital. You can't transfer it with a dollar. It can't. It's not compatible in the game. So the only way to get from here to there would be to map out all of the property in the world, all the digital titles, all of the new currency, all of the governance issues of the voting protocols. All of that stuff must be connected and given to people so that people can begin to contribute and claim titles for their property, your personal possessions, all the property you own, etc. So once we've mapped out all of that data, and then we've mapped out the rule sets and how the currency would be used, and everyone likes it and says, hey, you know what? I would rather play that game than this shitty game I'm playing now. Let's play it. We're ready. So that transition period may take years for us to develop all of these tools and to develop and title everything. But I don't think it'll take as long as people think. We're already been doing that, not just us, but there's multiple organizations who've been working on the individual pieces, the property titles, the mapping, the direct democracy, the voting, the governance structures, the cooperative enterprise management systems that is well researched and well developed. So all of these pieces are here. It's just a matter of what we're introducing, hoping to introduce, is a protocol level at a foundational economic protocol level that makes economics fair and that introduces a currency that gets created and dripped to each person, each community equally all over the world, perpetually, that can be used to that we so that we can command and get what we want out of the market. So, but that layer, is foundational and it's transitional. So it has to be
Yeah.
built and
It has
offered
to be
and
built,
created
and then there needs to be a
and
social
modeled.
movement that's going to create
Sure.
it. Right.
The
Right.
movement, the social movement it already exists. People have been, throughout history, people have been wanting more freedom, sovereignty, liberty, security, opportunity, all these things, right? These are not new. We've been struggling the same fight, against masters forever. Yet we persist in a system of perpetuating the idea that masters have to exist. Somebody has to make,
I pay the rent because if I don't pay the rent, I'll be evicted.
correct.
And that is true for millions and millions of people in this country and all over the world.
Same.
So I mean, the system is coercive. They have the power. They have the guns. They have the military. They have the police. Of course, all those are just human beings, and they can also be convinced to change their perspective. But
now, those things that you just mentioned, they have all those things. But what is the tool, the means of them being able to control all those peoples and their actions? What is it? It's money.
yeah, money and the threat of violence and power.
Well, of course, the threat of violence, but the threat of violence is able to be initiated and controlled through the use of money.
Yeah.
If the police no longer believe in your money and don't want your money, but they would rather have ours or in our system, then they're on our side. Now they're no longer willing to enforce.
Potentially.
It's
a big if, though. I mean, of course, because they're not going to be told to be on our side by by the people who are in power, right? They're going to be told to crack some heads of those people who are out there demanding something different.
However, if the value that the people who want them to crack heads isn't worth it anymore, if they don't see value in that currency and they see that game crumbling and around them, and it is crumbling.
And this is a moment. This not. I mean, this particular moment right now. I mean, are we like this? What do you think of this particular historical moment that we're in right now? I mean, right now, not last year, but like the in terms of the economics of this particular moment here and where things are going.
So this is great because I no longer have to make an argument that capitalism is not fit for, no one has to say now that capitalism is the greatest ever, it's stable, because it's not stable. And we've known it's not stable. One of the reasons why I even came on the path that I'm on and developed this idea is because I knew, because I'm in finance, in trading. As a matter of fact, I'm going to look at my stocks for a moment. Hold on. Okay. So I knew that there's three potential, cataclysmic events. There's going to be guaranteed economic instability. I mean, that's capitalism always going to have ups and downs. So that was a guarantee, and especially if you pay attention to the amount of currency that we've created, the amount of debt that's been created in the last 10 years, this binge, this huge bubble that we're creating, of course, is going to have ups and downs. So guaranteed economic instability and chaos. We're seeing it right now. Potential ecological collapse, right? And that's a function of our action and our behavior through our economy. So that has to change. And then I forget what the third one was. Ecological, economic. What could be the third one?
Let's see. Social, maybe mental health.
It doesn't matter. But those two, though, are both connected to the economic. And this moment that we're having, this pandemic, is great because all of those people who were cheerleading capitalism are now suffering. Specifically, the small businesses, those small business owners who view themselves as job creators. And listen, I've been a small business owner. I've hired people. I get it. I get how the feeling of importance, like you did something. I'm responsible for these people's lives, and I'm responsible for making sure that these guys have income so that they can provide food for their families, and I'm responsible. It's me who's giving them health insurance. Bullshit. I'm not doing
Right.
any of that. The capital is doing that. I got the money from investors and then customers. So anyway,
And the
uh,
workers, of course, are
yeah,
creating the wealth by producing whatever it is
yeah,
that they're producing, or whatever goods or
exactly.
services, of course. Yeah.
So right now, um, the the small business owners recognize that the equation is finally fundamentally broken,
Right.
and they're seeing it. And now we're going to phase back to 2008, where I like 2008 because it proved to the world. No, no. What 2008 did to the world is it finally put the spotlight on money, on currency. Like, what the fuck is money? Where did it come from? All of our lives, we just assume that this thing, money, is kind of like a neutral affair. It exists. We never really pay attention to how it was created. Most of us don't, at least. And so that was important. Now, this particular pandemic and situation is going to take us to the next level beyond just how money's created, but the actual equation of money, period. So I think it is an opportunity to change that paradigm, but people will be more open, I think, to hearing something different than they've heard before because of this pandemic. Hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, all the problems that we suffer from, even the misinformation, is a function of game A. Okay, because what's one of the most valuable resources in the world right now? Data, right, is becoming the new gold, and so that's another piece of property, right? And so data, if data is valuable, that means that, and you can collect value by controlling the data. That means that and if you can manipulate people and misinform them, well, then that's one way of you playing that game. And so misinformation, coercion, corruption, all of these things are built into the game A of owning property for value extraction and value appreciation. That's literally the game. I mean, the game of the world is to own as much shit as you can and collect as much of the money as you can. That's it.
And is it not true? I believe I read somewhere not long ago that most wealth is actually inherited, and this is more true in the United States than it is in anywhere in Europe. I believe that there's less social mobility here and more inherited wealth. And this is these people that own much of the property, like the building I live in, for example, and who own the Randall Group, who own properties up and down the West Coast. This is basically inherited wealth that gets passed on to their investors, and then, but what also I sort of, I don't know if this is probably a totally unrelated point actually, but this the way the rents have been and the mortgage, the costs of housing has been rising so dramatically, so much more dramatically than wages over the past couple of decades, especially. I mean, I wonder, I don't know if this is. Why is it? They talk about the financialization of real estate, and that sounds like something you can tell us something about. What is that?
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, it's all math. It's all numbers, right? And so imagine if we had $1 trillion total in the world. There's $1 trillion circulating in the world, and we double that amount. And I said, look, guys, we're going to create extra $1 trillion and distribute it to the game. Now you're going to have $2 trillion in the game. Now, in your head, you might think, well, if there's twice as much money in the game, then won't that cause inflation? Won't prices go up? Okay, and intuitively, that would be the case, except that what's happening here is that imagine that $1 trillion, almost most of it being owned by, say, one person, right? And so what you just did is you doubled the money supply, but you basically gave all of it to that one guy. So you didn't really double the money supply in terms of the totality of all the players. You concentrated it into a couple of people. Okay, so when you concentrate all that money to a couple of people, now there's only a limited amount of property that they can own for asset value extraction appreciation. So what can they buy with that money, right? Well, they can buy things like land, buildings, real estate, housing. They can buy stocks. They can buy bonds. They can buy treasury bills. They can buy patents. I mean, you can buy all kinds of things, right? So these are the properties that they invest in. And so as the money in circulation gets increased, the property in the game will get increased because that is increasing for the most part. Property is more or less kind of a stable growth trajectory. The amount of buildings and houses in the world is growing, but that's more or less stable. So if you're creating all this new capital, all this new wealth, well, then of course you're going to be competing for the value of the property in the game, right? And so the reason why real estate went up is two reasons. One of it was because the amount of currency in circulation increased, but the second reason was because the interest rates dropped. And so what that means is that the total cost expense of owning that house or that property is now less because I'm paying less for the interest. So and for the mortgage, et cetera. And so for the debt. So interest rates used to be as high as, I don't even know what the record is, but I know that my parents' first house that they bought was 18% back in 1980. Okay, so they bought a house. I know it sounds insane.
That's like credit card. Wow.
I know, but hear me out. But the house only cost $30,000.
Oh,
today that house is like over 400 something, almost 500,000. So you do the math there. What is 18% of 1,000? Who gives a shit? It's meaningless in terms of a 30-year note. But you know what? 5% of 500,000 is a hell of a lot more than 18% of 30. So in totality, the difference is night and day. But as interest rates go down, the price of the real estate will go up because the ownership of the house is lower for the owner, and so they use that more for the house. Right. So this is why real estate's been going up. Now
we lost you for a second there. Sure. Can you repeat that last that last sentence?
If as interest rates go lower, the cost of ownership to maintain and to own the property goes down. Therefore, the buyer is willing to pay more for the property, right? So it makes more sense. Okay, so put it this way: if you have a typical worker who's maybe earning, say,
wait, we lost your mic there. I think you buried it.
Sure. Oh, I did. Okay, so they're working at Nike, and they're making $8,000 a month, right? And now, so their budget, let's say their budget for a house is $3,000, right? That's the total amount that they're willing to spend on a month for a house. That includes, mortgage, property taxes, insurance, etc. And so that's their total amount. They can't go above that. If the interest rates rise, then that means that they can only afford a less expensive house to stay within that budget, right? And so, but as that interest rates goes lower, that means they can afford to buy a higher expensive house now than before because they're still staying within that budget. And so people's purchasing patterns are based on their budgets, not necessarily based on the total cost of the item. Obviously, you take those in tandem with the interest rate. But as interest rates go lower, it makes the housing more affordable, and the value will go up. And so them lower interest rates is actually a bad idea.
So lowering interest rates and the value goes up because the people who are selling the house are able to charge more because the interest rates are lower. So
the people who are buying the house are able to afford to pay more because the cost to pay for it, the mortgage, the maintain it on a monthly basis,
right,
is the same. So people.
What about the seller? What about the seller? What does
sellers don't give a shit?
I mean, they want to make more money though. They want to make as much money as possible. So they're going to
out of their hands. They can only sell what people are willing to buy. Real estate is unique like that. Every seller wants to sell everything for more than it's worth, especially for real estate.
But there's a lot of. I mean, it seems pretty clear that. I mean, at least in terms of the real estate developers who have largely bought the state legislatures and city councils throughout this country and have defeated rent control legislation since the 1980s. I mean, they have a political agenda, and they also they also engage in what a lot of people would call price fixing. I mean, in terms of like, if you
Correct.
own a lot of property, then you can fix prices and you can keep property off the market until you can get a good rate for it. I don't know how much of that is going to be going on. Like, I mean, it seems to me like I'm just like right now, what's going to happen with all these rents and mortgages as high as and unaffordable as they are for so many people all of a sudden? I mean, is it like, I know I'm surprised to the degree that the capitalists have been capable of shutting down their own economies. I did not think, I'm not surprised that China was able to, had the sort of central authority to do something like that. I am surprised that it's happened in Europe and the United States, although, you know, obviously they had the Chinese example to follow. Yeah, it was pretty shocking, right? That they, because I thought they were all about profit overall, but now it seems like enlightened self-interest and long-term thinking do enter into the equation a little bit, right? But then if that's the case, and if there is any long-term thinking going on, then landlords like the Randall Group and Prime Group and these companies that own thousands of buildings just on the West Coast alone, they're going to have to lower what they charge for rent. But they're not. But are they ever? What's it going to take? I wonder if that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's all up in the air right now because the unknown right now is that we have too many people who are unemployed. If there's no means, if the money doesn't circulate, the money doesn't flow, the capitalism, it stops. And so I don't know, but nobody knows this. But this is why we need to change, obviously, the economic equation so that nobody, because money is fake. We're using math to account for the flow of resources in the world, and we're using it in the wrong way, basically.
What do you think about the? I know I'm gonna leave you alone in a couple minutes here, but what do you think about how the debt, the U.S. debt is now, I believe, 25 trillion, and most of it is most of it owed to China? No, a lot of it's owed to China. Is that not? No.
There a lot. Yes, I haven't looked at the amount that China owns recently, but last time I did, it was like 5 trillion. But we have 24 trillion. Actually, the Federal Reserve now owns the money that they just created, the 2 trillion that they just printed, by the way, that they just added to our debt.
Right.
They bought themselves. Okay. Our own Federal Reserve, which is technically owned by our government. They're a private entity, but whatever profits they make, they report to us. We can't audit them. They just tell us how much they made. They give it to our federal government. So why is our federal government creating $2 trillion to borrow it from itself? It boggles the mind. But the debt, people don't understand what the debt is. Okay. So the debt is an asset. It's a piece of property in Game A to invest in. People don't realize the US government just created $24 trillion investable assets. The stock market is worth what? Apple's only worth $1 trillion by itself. Google's worth $1 trillion. Microsoft's worth $1 trillion. That's only $3 trillion. So you have the S&P 500, which may be worth, I don't know, $100 trillion. Our debt is $24 trillion. If you were to pay back the debt, where would $24 trillion of that money go? Those people who own the 24 trillion, those rich people, the Chinese government, corporations, insurance companies, other investors, where would they put that money? What other piece of property would they use that money? They would be competing to push up the property of real estate, of other office buildings, of other land, you name it, of corporations, the stock market.
Where would they put it?
More overvalued. So the debt is a way for them to, in a way, ironically, people don't realize this, to decrease the bubble and increase the stability of the financial system so that the financial players have a bigger foundation, a safer place to park their money that isn't prone to the wiles of the volatility of the market, because they're guaranteed and they're secure. You know for a fact, if you buy $1 million worth of treasuries, you're going to get the same amount of rate of return every month, and you'll get your $1 million at the end. That treasury may not be worth $1 million anymore, because over time it can lose value if the interest rates change and your treasury doesn't pay as much as other notes, because it is a piece of property. But at the end, you will get your money back. Interestingly, by the way, people don't realize this. When the government sells treasuries, so the treasuries that we just sold, those $2 trillion. So they sell the treasuries. They say to the investors, hey, look, we're going to give you your money, but every year we're going to pay you, 1%. It's pretty low right now, maybe even less than that on treasuries. So we're going to pay you 1% for the next 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, we're going to give you your money back. So you're a rich person. You buy $1 million worth of treasuries. You give the government $1 million. They give you this piece of paper that says, you own this treasury. You get the interest every year for 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, they give you your money back. Let me ask you a question. Where did they get that $1 million to give you your money back?
Just from the debt, right? Or just
No.
they printed it?
Okay, exactly. They're recycling the debt. They never pay it back. They sold it to somebody else, to an existing.
And only the federal government of the U.S. can. Other federal governments can do this, but the U.S. has a particular advantage in doing this money printing because the dollar is the world's reserve currency, right?
Right.
Might that change? Might that change if the debt gets big enough?
It's a belief structure. You and I and the rest of the world all believe in money, in the dollar.
What if we start believing in the euro? Are you French? What if we start believing in the euro instead?
We could, but we won't. That's the same thing as the dollar. What's the difference?
So where can I ask? Where are you from?
I was born in Yugoslavia. I'm Albanian. So I was born near Greece and Albania. It's now North Macedonia. So it was communist.
Right, yeah.
My dad and my grandfather told me stories about how they transitioned a couple times. And so in each transition, what was interesting was that they had to reallocate and claim every single plot of land and build. I mean, because how can you start a game if you don't know who owns what and what the rules are, right? So you have to. Properties is a part of that. That was interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, so money is a belief system. The only reason Bitcoin has any value is because those people are willing to believe in that has value. It only has value as long as those people believe it has value. Stocks and everything else in the world is the same thing. Money itself is just a trust game. Have you ever read Yuval Harari?
No.
Oh God. He's amazing.
What do you recommend? What's the book you recommend?
Sapiens. The other two are good too. Those are newer.
Oh yeah, Sapiens, I've been reading that one actually. Yeah, I didn't know that was the author. Yeah, very interesting.
But equally, I prefer listening to Yuval speak.
Actually, me too. I'm listening to the book.
Yeah,
I like audiobooks much better than reading books. Yeah, because I used to play
Sapiens twice.
Right. Great.
Because it was so good. That was a couple of years ago. Anyway, but he's good. I like him because he's really good at pointing out that money is a human make-believe construct, that we can actually, it only has value because we believe it.
Have you read the book Debt by David Graeber?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that, would you recommend that one? Good interesting read? Or?
It's a very interesting read. I prefer David's other books. They're much more entertaining in a way.
Okay. What's your favorite?
The Rules of Utopia.
Great.
I think it's called.
I got to look for that.
Oh, that's the best. Something like that. It's a funny title, but something about utopia, the rules of utopia. But it's a lot about bureaucracy. It's very interesting.
Great, so Remzi. What's your last name?
It is. You want me to just type it here?
Sure.
Is it,
or maybe can it be done once it's already in there? I don't know, but I was just wondering to tell people about it later. But we can find it on your website, commonplanet.org. Yeah, that's on the website. Remzi, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, it does, it does. Well, I want because I want to get you back on for another economics lesson sometime, maybe like a pre-planned one.
It would be great. But yeah, if you guys can look at that information, I apologize. It's old. I haven't updated it in a while because it wasn't something that I wanted to do. I was hoping that somebody smarter and more famous, or famous at all, would champion this idea and be like, "Hey, this is a fucking good idea. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to run with it." Because listen, you mentioned it briefly a little bit earlier, but at some point we have to compete against the existing power dynamic, and I'm afraid of these motherfuckers because they're murderers.
Right. Exactly. Right. They are genocidal murders. But if you write the book, then we can hopefully get a whole lot of other people on board.
Exactly. Once the book is out, then it's too late.
Yeah. Excellent. Really looking forward to it.
Thanks for letting me come on.
Thanks so much for coming.
I was just on Facebook and I saw you guys like, hey, I'll just listen. I didn't know I was going to
Wonderful.
actually come on.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. Wonderful. It worked out brilliantly. Totally
Exactly.
unexpectedly worked out great. Thank
Here's
you.
my email address, by the way, just in case. But yeah, I mean, I would love to do something with you guys locally for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and all this
Just
time we've been
randomly.
getting comments, which I've completely not been paying attention to. I'm so sorry. All you people who have been commenting. Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. Okay. I was way too busy talking to Remzi and not looking at comments, but
I'm sorry.
no, I don't think anybody, I don't know if anybody had any questions for you, but we'll just have to, you save up those questions for the next time we interview Remzi and go to his website. And people can find you there. I imagine they can find you. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you so much. Take care.
All
See you
right.
again.
Bye.
And that was a wonderful interview with Remzi from commonplanet.org, and a totally unexpected, unplanned interview. And I hope you enjoyed that half as much as I did. And I don't know if I'll make a habit of doing the open mic, given that only one person called in, but it was the right person. And maybe I'll do it again, and we'll plan in advance next time. This, as with all of my programming, you can find on the Discussions with David playlist on my YouTube channel, and you can also find it if you look up This Week with David Rovics on any podcasting platform. And if you want to sign up to the open mic, which is a poetry and music open mic, which I'm hosting on this platform every Monday, then you can find it at davidrovics.com/POMM and sign up to the open mic. And that's a planned in advance thing every Monday. And then the other weekday mornings, I usually interview somebody. But today's guest couldn't make it, so I did an open mic instead, and had one guest for the entire hour who was very, very interesting, as I imagine you might agree. And if you want to support my podcasting and musical touring, non-touring, rent-paying, non-rent-paying, whatever kinds of efforts, go to davidrovics.com/subscribe or patreon.com/davidrovics. And signing off, I'm signing off. And thank you so much for listening, whoever you are out there. And sorry again to all those people who commented who I didn't even notice your commenting, because I was trying to pay so much attention to what Ramsey was saying, because it was basically, I'm not an economist, so I had to pay a close attention so I didn't lose track of what he was talking about. And I couldn't do three things at once, but I'll try better next time. And now I'm going to look at those comments, and take care, everybody out there, and don't pay the rent. Bye.